Welcome back to the deep dive. We are jumping straight into a roadmap today, one that really challenges the core assumptions of how many organizations, maybe you're leading a startup, a nonprofit, even a ministry, how they define success. The sources we've got argue that most ventures, they kind of hit a wall, they stall out, and it's not usually from lack of effort.
Right.
It's because they've built up what Chris R. Villasis, the author we're looking at, calls fragile momentum.
Yeah, we're taking a hard look at Villasis's work, Breaking the Growth Barrier.
Yeah.
It's basically a guide built on like 25 years of field-tested strategy, and it fundamentally shifts the whole conversation.
Oh, so?
It moves from just getting big to getting durable.
Sustainable.
Durable. I like that. So our mission today is to pull out the leadership wisdom from this, because Villasis is arguing that lasting influence, real multiplication, it comes from focusing on depth before you worry about breadth.
Exactly. Depth first. We need to break down this three-part framework he lays out. Foundational principles, the historical proof, and then the really practical implementation strategy. It's all designed so a movement can survive, even thrive, after the original leader is gone.
Building a system not just relying on one charismatic figure.
Right. It's about the system. Okay, let's unpack this.
So first off, defining the problem.
Yeah.
What actually is this growth barrier? In organizational terms, it's that point where the early excitement, the initial growth, it just fails to turn into sustainable, mature self-sufficiency.
Okay.
Villasis calls this critical time the seedling stage. If you don't navigate this transition right, you stagnate. Or worse, you collapse.
So are we talking about things like scaling failure, or maybe that dependency on the founder, that common problem where success is just measured by how fast the numbers go up?
That's precisely the insight for you, the listener. The source argues hard against using institutional size or speed as the main sign of health.
Oh.
The core idea, the thesis, is that real, durable growth comes from, and I'm quoting loosely here, cultivating deep-rooted disciples who can reproduce, lead, and multiply movements beyond dependency.
Real.
You have to shift your focus. Stop just serving consumers. Start empowering creators.
That's a powerful idea. But let's be real. It's easy to say depth is better than breadth. How do you actually measure that? How do you measure depth without it just becoming, fuzzy qualitative goals?
Well, you measure it by the outputs
Yeah.
of that health. Things like the depth of transformation, the endurance of vision, the legacy of lives changed. Not just the easy stuff like short-term revenue or headcount. And what's really fascinating here, the source uses this organic growth model. It's simple. Root fruit.
Root fruit. Okay.
Yeah. And that analogy basically demands that we spend our time tending the soil. The internal practices, the relationships, the simple, repeatable instruction. Focus on that more than polishing the programs or the fancy external messages.
Okay, tending the soil. But if the framework insists on depth before breadth, it needs more than just a catchy analogy, right? What's the evidence? Is there historical foundational proof for this model?
Absolutely. And Villasis goes there. He looks at what he calls the original blueprint for multiplication. The core job isn't just conversion or like customer acquisition.
Right.
It's making people capable of replicating the mission themselves.
So you're talking about the Great Commission idea, train others, but framed almost like a management train the trainer strategy.
Exactly. And you see the end goal in Paul's vision, entrusting the teaching to faithful people who will be able to teach others also. It's inherently a system of cascading mentorship.
Okay.
And how did those early communities do it? It wasn't grand strategies. It was simple, scalable micro habits. Things laid out in acts, like devotion to shared teaching, fellowship, sharing meals, praying together, shared community patterns that let the movement scale robustly.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me. Connecting that foundational blueprint to actual historical examples. Does this model work outside that specific early context?
Yes, and the sources provide three key examples. First, you've got the Moravians, 18th century.
Yeah.
The renewal at Herrnhut, it focused on disciplined spirituality, intense shared life, real depth.
Right.
And that internal depth created such fierce devotion and accountability. It fueled this incredible sustained push for global engagement.
So the internal change drove the external impact. Makes sense. What's next?
Second, the early Methodists under John Wesley. Wesley cleverly avoided building huge centralized structures. Instead, he scaled leadership through lay people in small accountable groups, class meetings, bands.
The small groups again.
Exactly. These were formational, focused on confession, scripture, accountability. The structure itself was the growth engine.
Okay, Moravians, Methodists, and the third, a modern one.
Yeah, the sources point to Korean cell church models. They show how really simple decentralized groups can work today. The key is the group leader isn't just taught to teach, but trained to launch new groups.
Multiplication built in.
Right, it turns spectators into shepherds, basically.
Yeah.
So if you connect the dots, the big takeaway from history seems clear. Effective, reproducible structure plus invested local leadership. It beats top-down, centralized expansion every time.
You can't scale expertise, you scale capacity. I like that.
Oh, precisely.
Okay, I appreciate that emphasis on capacity. Now, before we get to the how-to, we need that critical diagnosis. If we've launched, okay, what makes these seedlings wilt? What are the common failure modes?
Villasis points out a few common derailers. The first big one is imported leadership and dependency.
Okay.
If the leadership or the money or even the core message is always controlled from the outside, true maturity it can't happen. It's a failure to embrace what some call the 3-self principle: self-governing, self-supporting, self-propagating.
Right, if you always need the outside expert or the grant money to survive.
You haven't built a movement. You've just built a franchise,
Yeah,
basically.
we see that all the time. The consultant leaves and everything kind of collapses. Okay, what's pitfall number 2?
Metrics without maturity.
Hmm.
Villasis is really clear.
Yeah.
High activity doesn't equal deep transformation.
Hmm.
The sources mentioned the Reveal study, which looked at churchgoers, and the findings were pretty shocking. Program participation, like attending classes, volunteering it, did not reliably predict actual spiritual growth or maturity.
Wow. So you can have packed events, high engagement.
And still have a very shallow organization.
Yeah, that forces a tough question for leaders, doesn't it? Are we measuring busyness or actual impact?
Yeah.
Okay, and the third pitfall.
Resilience planning. Failure? Or maybe failing plan for resilience?
Yeah.
If you only train people for comfort, for convenience, they're just totally unprepared when pressure hits. Growth crisis, external challenge, whatever. The source really emphasizes discipling for endurance. Communities have to learn to normalize weakness, practice mutual care. So they don't just fracture under pressure. You have to train for difficulty, not just smooth sailing.
That leads us right into the solution then, the practical part. This is the immediate actionable stuff for you listening, the seedling practicum. What are the key frameworks here for building that durable, reproducible DNA?
Yeah, the actual framework has to be simple, right? Low barrier, high transfer. So for rooted in the word depth, that internal focus, conviction implements something like a first 90 days plan. Simple daily accountability rhythms for internal discipline, reflection, keep it basic.
Okay, basic rhythms. And for building that resilience you mentioned, the grit needed to handle trials.
That's resilience in trials, grit. And it means proactive planning. Teaching specific ways to process hardship, like shared lament practices, intentionally creating spaces where people can practice mutual care. You prepare people for reality, not wishful thinking. That builds endurance.
Makes sense. And the big one, how do we actually embed multiplication? Train the trainer DNA. How do you get that into the community without just burning out the core leaders?
The system has to be simple and it has to be expected, non-negotiable. The book suggests implementing this really accessible 3-3-3 rhythm.
3-3-3.
Yeah, it's an expectation for everyone. 3 people you pray for or check in with daily, 3 invitations or acts of service you commit to weekly, and 3 apprentices you are actively coaching or mentoring.
Okay.
It makes replication an everyday discipline, not some big annual program launch.
That sounds simple. Maybe almost too simple. Does that 3-3-3 rhythm actually produce quality leaders or just, busy people ticking boxes?
That's a fair question, and that's why you need the supporting pipeline behind it. For leadership from the ground up, Indigenous, Villasis recommends a simple 3-phase pipeline. It celebrates character over charisma.
Okay, what are the phases?
Helper handles simple tasks. Then facilitator can lead the group. And finally, trainer whose main job is launching new groups and raising the next leaders.
Ah, so it's an organic promotion path based on capability and reproduction.
Exactly. It's built in. And since the whole goal of this roadmap is depth, longevity, we absolutely have to change how we measure success. We have to ditch the old lag indicators, nickels and noses, attendance and revenue, and switch to leading indicators of health.
Right. This is the Seedling Health Dashboard you mentioned earlier, the new metrics for maturity. Let's break down those 4 indicators.
Okay. They're designed to measure the internal reality, not just the outside appearance. They are abiding, belonging, becoming, and blessing.
Okay, abiding. That measures internal discipline. Like, is there real evidence of consistent personal practices? Are we seeing fruits like joy, humility, repentance, stuff that shows deep internal work?
Exactly. Then belonging. This measures team cohesion, relational health. Is there evidence of conflict repair? genuine hospitality, tangible, practical care happening within the community. If you don't have that,
You just have a network, not really a movement.
precisely. Third is becoming. This looks at character development. Is there resilience under pressure?
Mm.
Ethical growth that leaders can actually point to and affirm.
Okay. Abiding, belonging, becoming. And the last one.
Blessing. This is the indicator of external reproducible impact. Things like organic evangelism happening, identifiable apprentices being raised up, new fellowships or teams actually being launched. This is the only one that really allows for numbers, but it's numbers tied directly to multiplication, not just addition.
That's a much richer picture than just counting heads. The sources even give a blueprint for getting started quickly, right? A 90-day sprint. What are the stages there?
Yeah, a practical way to kickstart it. The first 30 days are root and relate. You launch those new accountability rhythms. You map out who's connected to whom within the team or group.
Get the basics in place.
Right. Then days 3160 are practice and prototype. This is where apprentices start co-leading things. You run maybe a resilience workshop. You get hands-on experience, make mistakes in a safe space.
Learn by doing.
Exactly. And finally, days 6190 are multiply and measure. You actually commission new micro-fellowships or sub-teams. You start applying that 4-indicator dashboard seriously. And crucially, you create an exit strategy for the external or senior leaders
An exit strategy. Why?
to ensure true local ownership is cemented. The goal is for the senior leader to work themselves out of that specific job, empowering the new local leaders fully.
Okay, that makes sense. It forces the handover.
But this raises an important point. While the model pushes multiplication, the sources are careful to include guardrails, necessary warnings.
Like what?
We have to caution against prioritizing speed over substance. Many scholars looking at these kinds of movement practices warn that aggressive expansion absolutely needs robust doctrine, strong ethics, deep pastoral care alongside it. Theological ballast, you could say.
So don't move so fast you break things or lose your foundations.
Exactly. The wisdom seems to be move fast enough to obey, slow enough to form. Find that balance.
That is the perfect tension to end on, I think. We've kind of journeyed from that anxiety of stagnation, maybe you feel that, to the potential power of this reproducible, deep-rooted growth. The fundamental shift this whole roadmap calls for is trading those, shallow wins for deep roots, trading urgency for endurance, and trading maintenance for multiplication. It's a total rethink of priorities.
It really is.
Think about that leader who stops counting the big annual events and starts counting the apprentices they're raising. The one who trades the polished, expensive spectacle for just open, reproducible systems. Trades quick fixes for quiet, consistent obedience.
Yeah.
Because when that inevitable crisis hits or the downturn comes, those deep roots that were cultivated allow the structure to flex. New local leaders emerge naturally, and the mission spreads instead of just collapsing back into dependence on the center.
That's the vision.
So, here's the thought to leave you with. If lasting influence really does grow quietly, organically, maybe even while you sleep, what essential formation-focused practices are you maybe neglecting right now because they don't look flashy, because they lack spectacle or obvious scale? And maybe more pointedly, how do you measure the health of a root when the culture around you only seems to celebrate the size of the orchard?